Hey, what's up everybody? Today I'm going to be ranking every Lorde song from the worst to the best. Lorde has been a mainstay in pop music ever since her breakout hit Royals.
I've never seen a diamond in the flesh.
It was absolutely everywhere and just boosted her into the spotlight. She was then kind of forced to release her first EP, the Love Club EP, shortly followed by her debut studio album Pure Heroine later in that same year. She since then has gone on to release two more studio albums, being Melodrama and Solar Power just recently in 2021, some of which have been more well acclaimed than others. But me, as someone who is a massive Lorde fan, I thought I would be a pretty good person to rank all of her songs from the worst to the best. Obviously, this is just my opinion, and a lot of these placements on my list I could see changed around, so if your list looks completely different, I totally understand. And with that being said, I think we should just get right into the ranking. Leader of a New Regime. I just don't really even know what to say about this one. It's not particularly bad, but I just am so indifferent about it. It's just not memorable and kind of boring.
It feels better biting down.
Biting Down just feels pretty boring in comparison to the rest of the EP, and I guess her discography as a whole. California. This song's just not that great, to be honest, and with an artist I love as much as Lorde, not being really good will land you near the bottom. Helen of Troy. It's the more tonally consistent track of the two bonus tracks from Solar Power, but it's also just kind of boring. It has a decent vocal performance, but other than that, it's just not very memorable and doesn't really hold as much of a special place in my heart since it is just a bonus track on the deluxe.
There was a sound to our innocence.
Hold No Grudge. Also a bonus track, but this one kind of just feels like that. It's not as tonally consistent with the album as Helen of Troy, but I overall just like the vibe of the song a little bit more. But still, at the end of the day, again, it's just a bonus track off the deluxe, so it doesn't really hold any special place in my heart, and it's just a decent song. A World Alone. It's a solid outro to Pure Heroine. I don't necessarily have anything wrong with it. It's just kind of forgettable, especially compared to the rest of the experience.
Beautifully falling apart.
The Man with the Axe. Another track on here that's kind of just fine. It has a solid vocal performance, but there's a difference between simplicity and an instrumental that just isn't that great. And compared to some of the other songs on Solar Power, which have amazing instrumentals but are very simple, this one just feels more uninteresting, but it's still not a bad song by any means.
Baby, you're a big star.
Big Star. The track above this one won out this position purely due to nostalgia. This is just a pretty solid track, and I love Lorde's vocal inflections on the hook, and that's kind of the big appeal of this song, is that, you know, it might not be that great from front to back, but it does have an element that I do really like compared to some of the other songs, which are just fine.
We'll never be
Royals. I might be sick of it being the only thing on the radio when it came out, but I still do like this song a lot. It has some nice moments of lyricism dealing with Lorde's acceptance of not coming from money and being content with her life and friends that she has, regardless of her bigger dreams of fame and fortune. And at the end of the day, it's not a skip, but it feels relatively uneventful compared to a lot of her songs, and upon kind of re-listening to it critically for this video, I just found the instrumental and production to be mostly just plain and bare bones, not interesting enough for my personal taste. Glory and Gore. It's a alright track, to be honest. It's pretty good, and at least within the context of an individual track, completely separate of the album. I don't think it works as well as it does when listening to this thing front to back, but it's just pretty good. And again, same thing as I said before, just pretty good. Won't get you very much on a list, especially with me being as big of a Lorde fan as I am.
There's something I want, but money and time.
Million Dollar Bills. Doesn't quite have the lyrical chops even to match up to the other tracks on her debut Love Club EP, which has less polished lyrics than any of her other projects in any ways, in my opinion. But just passively listening to this, it's a super fun and upbeat track that's just well done overall, so.
And I'm not in the swing of things, but what I
Still Sane. Really not much to this track, but I do love how simple it is, and it really does let Lorde's vocals really shine at points. Liability Reprise. This is the one out of the interlude kind of tracks on Melodrama that really does just feel mostly like an interlude. That's its main downfall to me. It is a reprise, a good one at that, but it just doesn't feel right placing it above amazing songs and classics that are yet to come.
flick them down like dominoes. Must feel good being missed to start.
Dominoes. Short, sweet, and simple. Really, what more can you really ask for?
Baby boy, you're super cool. I know you're scared, so was I. But oh,
Oceanic Feeling. A great song, but a fantastic outro track. I find it weirdly fitting that this is the longest track on the record, kind of inexplicably so, but it really is great, and I appreciate how minimal it is.
I like you. I love these roads where the houses don't share.
400 Lux. Feels really nostalgic, but at the end of the day, it's just not as instrumentally interesting to match up to some of the higher tracks. It is great lyrically and connects with me, but not elite enough to raise it up to one of the absolute best songs. Solar Power. Only right that the title track encapsulates everything about this album and just the overall vibe of the project.
Let's go down to the tennis court and talk it up like yeah.
Tennis Court. Absolute classic. It's just simply an earworm. Contains some pretty great lyrics and works as a fantastic intro to not only the sound of this record, but especially the theme of newfound fame that this album tackles.
Let's hope the sun will show us the path.
The Path. This is such a great sounding track. Very mellow and sets the tone for the album perfectly. Does exactly what an opening track should do and more. It's just an overall great listen.
Secrets from a girl who's seen it all.
Secrets from a Girl Who's Seen It All. I'll be completely honest, I don't really have all that much to say about this. It's just a great song that I love listening to.
'Cause I was raised up to be admired.
Bravado. An amazing opening, a super underrated track. Turns into a meh instrumental, but great lyricism about being very introverted and learning to accept her new fame and in turn gaining confidence from it.
White teeth teens are up for it. I know.
White Teeth Teens. Literally the second least streamed song on the album according to Spotify. It's just such an underrated song and needs way more love. I think this track is absolutely fantastic, and to me personally, at least from a lyricism standpoint, it really just connects with me a lot more than some of these other songs, and I just absolutely love listening to it. It just gives me a great feeling inside, and it's just fun. It's a great song, man.
The terror and the horror when we wonder why we bother. Ooh.
Sober 2, Melodrama. Does it sound like an interlude? Yeah, kinda. Is it better than the first part of the song? Probably not, but it is really interesting and it does compete against that first part. And considering it is kind of just a follow-up second part to an already amazing song, I think it does pretty well and holds up. Fallen Fruit. A common pattern I've noticed with Solar Power as an album is that I love its simplicity and how it accentuates the vocal performances. This is no exception to that, and I also love the little beat switch in the middle, which then transitions the song into a less whispery singing into something a little more full with a bit louder vocals and louder instrumentals, which I think works really well for what it is.
But we care to what we saw. I'm in a dream with a fever.
Sober. Super upbeat, great follow-up to Green Light. And to me, above all else, it's a fantastic car song. I love just absolutely blasting this song with the windows down, just driving. It's an absolute vibe.
We live in cities you'll never see on screen.
Team. It's truly, to me, the best of the two mega hits from this album, being this song and Royals. These are the ones that I heard all the time on the radio, and I remember this being the one that I thought was way better, and confused as to why Royals was like the biggest on the album by a decent shot. I still think this by like quite a big margin. I think this is the much better constructed song. I guess it just doesn't resonate as much with people, but I still think to this day that this is the better one.
I'm in a click, but I want out. It's not the same as when I was.
The Love Club. I could make some point about this being a tongue-in-cheek track of essentially the consequences of becoming famous, framing it as a great thing where everything will glow for you, as the song quotes. This is great, obviously, but it's simply just the most enjoyable track on her first EP. It's just instrumentally fun, great lyrics, flows, everything kind of just works together to make a really entertaining track. Hard Feelings, Loveless. A great two-part track, equally impressive on both ends, on the Hard Feelings part of the track and the Loveless part of the track. They feel very different instrumentally, but they work really well as a whole, and I just think it's an overall fantastic listen. But it doesn't quite stack up to like the very, very best on this album, which is already my favorite album of all time.
Boom, 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 and make them all dance to it.
The Louvre. A cute little sentiment to this track, and I absolutely love the hook. It just has some fantastic little lyrics, great instrumental, just really fun little song. It's not too long, doesn't overstay its welcome, and it's just concise and fun.
In your car, the radio up. In your car, the radio up. We keep trying to talk.
Supercut. This one really has grown on me a lot. I used to think it was one of the weaker tracks on the album, and despite it still being great because it is my favorite album, I do like this one more than I used to, and I was not expecting this to be top 10 at the end of the day when I finished ranking these. Buzzcut Season. There's not that much that I have to say about this track. It's just phenomenal all around, really, and surprisingly better than I remember, even though it's on one of my favorite albums already. I remember I used to think that this was a weaker song on the album, and I heard other people say that this was one of their favorite Lorde songs in general, not even just on the album, and it kind of confused me, but upon many re-listens of this project and of this song, I've really come around to it, and it feels some of the most nostalgic and just personal to me out of this entire album, let alone her entire discography.
I can't feel a thing.
Mood Ring, by far my most played song on Solar Power, and after so many listens it still holds up completely. Pure fun and upbeat energy, great production, and just an absolute blast to listen to.
Maybe I'm stoned at the nail salon.
Stoned at the Nail Salon. This is my favorite off of Solar Power, and it's just an absolutely beautiful ballad. Basically just pure singing with some guitar in the back, and it really shows off Lorde's vocal chops.
Into the arms of the girl that I love, the only love I haven't screwed up.
Liability. Very lyrically dense and an emotional track. It hits just as hard every single time I listen to it, and it is a little difficult to get through because of how emotionally potent it is, but it's just such a fantastic song that I really just can't stop it once it starts playing.
I am my mother's child. I love you till my breath.
Writer in the Dark. I think the main reason I prefer this to Liability being the two main kind of slow, sad ballads from this album is purely in the vocal performance. Just the rawness of Lorde's vocal cracking and imperfections make this incredibly beautiful, and despite it being one of my least played tracks from the album, I think same thing with some of the other tracks that I've mentioned on this list so far. I really underrated this one first few times around on this album, and because of that I kind of got accustomed to playing some of these other songs way more and never came back to this one as much, failing to realize how fantastic it really is. Perfect Places. Just no pun intended, the most perfect, grandiose ending to this phenomenal album. I really can't describe it, but it just feels like the perfect wrap-up, a perfect concluding song to everything this album had to say. And on top of everything else, it is just one of the most fun, upbeat, energetic songs you'll ever hear. It's just super catchy and just a phenomenal song.
Blowing shit up with homemade dynamite.
Homemade Dynamite. One of the catchiest songs I've ever heard in my life. Just has the stickiest hook you'll ever hear and a really amazing instrumental. This is one of the most re-listenable songs I've ever heard in my entire life, and I will continue to blast this one very, very often because it's just so good. Green Light. Literally a perfect pop song and a perfect intro to the album. So close to being my number one, and it's an ideal listen in the car when you're in a good mood. I'll just crank the volume and sing this at the top of my lungs. As much as I didn't want to be basic, and I kind of wanted to be a little different by including a less popular song as my favorite off of Melodrama, something like maybe Writer in the Dark, I just really couldn't fathom putting anything else in first place of this album. Even though it's the most popular song by a pretty decent shot, it's fantastic. It's basically a perfect song. If you don't like this song somehow, I just don't understand you.
Drink you spill all over me. Lovers spit left on repeat. Mom and dad let me.
Ribs. Just absolutely the definition of nostalgia music. Instrumentally interesting, lyrically fantastic, beautiful vocals. Everything about this song is just simply perfect. I'm listening back to these albums in order, so this is only the 8th song I'm listening to in this binge, and I'm almost certain this won't be beat. Those were kind of the notes I was writing down as I was listening through these albums, and I mean, I was right. This was the 8th song I listened to out of 39, and it just wasn't beat. Simple as that, really. It's my favorite Lorde song. It has been for basically as long as I can remember. I heard Melodrama first because I'd heard it was their most acclaimed album, so I checked that one out first of all. And because I loved it so much, I also checked out Pure Heroin. And as soon as I heard this song, I knew that it was special, and I knew that it was basically my favorite that she had made, even though Melodrama at that point was probably my favorite album. You know, it's just absolutely special when there's a song on an album that you don't like as much as like your favorite, and it just is so undeniably your favorite song from that artist. That's just how you know it's an amazing song, and that's how I feel about Ribs. Despite Pure Heroin, in my opinion, even though it's one of my favorite albums, I don't think as an album it stacks up to Melodrama. It still has that track. It still has Ribs, which is just beyond everything and simply just means so much to me as a song, and I will never forget this. I will always listen to this. It's just my favorite. Arguably one of, if not my favorite song of all time. And that is going to do it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you loved Lorde just as much as I do, definitely make sure to let me know in the comment section what you thought of my list, what placements you would change, what songs you have near the top, what are your favorite albums of hers. I'd love to hear everyone's opinions, have some discussions down there in the comment section. But as I said, hope you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe to my channel, leave a like on the video. That's going to do it. I'll see you guys in the next one.